and I'll hand over to you, Ryan.
Thanks, Renee. I'll just welcome everyone this morning. I'll bring up my presentation for today, and yeah, we'll just kind of get started from there. Get a thumbs up from Renee that you can see the screen. Yeah,
Yep.
fantastic. Welcome everyone today to the National CPD session. So today's session is the LGBTQIA plus community and our role as healthcare professionals. My name is Ryan Wallace, for those who don't know me. My pronouns are he, him. And so my role here at AAA is as the clinical advisor for psychosocial disability in Victoria and Tasmania. And I felt quite grateful to be asked to present on this. Initially a few nerves around, okay, how am I going to present on this broad, diverse community? But I did some reflection on some of the work I've done and felt that I had hopefully share some of my experiences with you and just kind of hopefully validate as well, some of the work you're doing in this space. I've spoken to a lot of clinicians over the past year since I've come into this new role. And really it's just been affirming some of their practices and just, making them feel more comfortable in this space. So yeah, I hope you gain a lot from today. So before we begin, in the spirit of reconciliation, I wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. I'd like to pay my respect to the elders, past and present, and extend that respect to any and all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. I also want to acknowledge the individual and collective expertise of those with a living or lived experience of disability, and note we can only provide quality care through valuing, respecting, and drawing from this expert knowledge. For myself, working in the psychosocial space, this has kind of been deeply connected to my work in terms of the work we do now in the psychosocial space. Um, the way it's improved is because we now hear those stories of individuals with a lived experience of mental health. And I think as I sat here today thinking about talking about the LGBTQ community, that's another big piece. For a long time, the stories were not shared from this community. And so now we get to hear their stories and we have a lot more awareness and growing from that. And it actually just leads me into kind of before we started, I was reflecting on, oh, yeah, where did I learn kind of more about the history of where things are at? So I did just want to briefly mention, some of you may be aware of this documentary. It came out last year. It's called Queer Australia, and it's presented by Zoe Coombs-Marr, and it's a really great kind of history of where Australia is and kind of a bit of a reminder as well about how far things have come, but where things we hope to be in the future. That reminder of gay marriage came through not that long ago, and different laws and stuff within Australia didn't change all that long ago for the LGBTQ community. So if you are looking for just a piece of something to watch and learn from, I think it's a really relevant documentary. So I felt like I had to um, slip that in there. Before we launch, I'll just go through some housekeeping things. This is an interactive session, so please consider your safety and surroundings when engaging with the presentation. Generally, this presentation will be mostly me presenting information, but I really do encourage you to engage in the chat, add in thoughts, perspectives, experiences. Again, like I said, I'm just one person here kind of describing and talking about this community. If you have points and stuff to share, I'd really encourage you to engage in the chat. Yeah. React to feedback. There'll be a short feedback survey after the presentation, just to let us know, what you thought of the presentation. And also, please feel free to email Clinical Excellence or even in myself if you're just wanting to give more specific feedback. For those who know me, feedback is a huge part of my work and very important to me in the work that we do. I think we should always be asking for feedback, so please feel comfortable to do so. And so just as we begin, I want to really acknowledge this is like an introduction to this LGBT community space. I won't be able to cover every aspect of, sexuality, gender, different aspects of the community, but I hope it'll really be that beginning space for you and kind of just increasing that self-awareness for you in this space. All of us will hold different levels of knowledge in this space, whether they're from even, personal experiences of what we bring to this, or some of the work that we've been doing. So yeah, I hope you, gain something from today. Secondly, a big piece of today, like I just mentioned, is around self-reflection. So I was actually kind of thinking about a scenario recently where I went with my friend to a queer art exhibition. I went with my straight female friend, and we were wandering around looking at everything. And right at the end of the art exhibition, she said, "Wow, I don't think I've ever considered my sexuality and gender this much." And it was that real moment for me that went, this has been a huge part of, my own life. And then what it is to be a part of the LGBT community is to really be considering all these aspects of gender identity, sexuality, and where you kind of fit into the world and stuff. So yes, I will be asking you to kind of do some self-reflection and stuff. So in noting that, please be aware that, if any of this feels heavy to you, please utilize formal supports like EAP, things like that, just to support yourself. And I just wanted to kind of firstly, before we get into the content, kind of mention a bit about me and why me? Why am I the one presenting this? So I've worked in the psychosocial disability, mental health space for the past 10 years. My background as an occupational therapist. And so that focus for me was always working with individuals on being able to better tell their own stories of their experience. I've been able to participate in quite a bit of training around supporting individuals with diverse sexuality in Australia and also in Canada while I worked there for a bit. So I got to see kind of different perspectives. And I've been fortunate enough to work with quite a few individuals who are gender diverse and who have been really open in sharing their experiences with me and giving me opportunities to support them through and navigate the healthcare system, which, as many of us probably know, it is complex and complicated. And so often for the LGBTQ community, there's another layer there. And I myself identify as a gay male, and so being part of this community is deeply important to me. Even kind of being able to be in a space like today and feel quite safe to talk about things like this really acknowledges to me how much things have even changed, even from 10 years ago when I started working in healthcare. I think we can all acknowledge there's an increased awareness, but I definitely also feel that there's an increased sense of safety and a want of visibility from not just individuals we're seeing to open up and be honest with us, but sometimes for us to be honest with them about who we are. And I just lastly wanted to say I'm definitely not the expert here. That's a big phrase that I use kind of throughout my work, but even as I prepared this presentation, that came on strongly to me in just realizing all these other pieces of information and even I myself learning things throughout this. And so just a reminder that the participant will always be the expert in this space. So hopefully it will give you some tools to navigate that conversation. All right, so the aim of today's session is really just to increase our knowledge and awareness of the LGBT community and our role as healthcare professionals, kind of where we fit in this space, in our roles in NDIS. Firstly, we'll start off by kind of meeting the LGBTQ community. I'm going to be using the acronym LGBTQ throughout. Obviously, the longer acronym is LGBTQIA+, which encompasses everything. I'm going to use LGBTQ just for the sake of throughout the presentation. So we're going to meet the community, understand by talking through some of the language, terminology, so we all have that kind of common understanding of things, and therefore then talking about sexuality and gender, kind of separating those two. Um, and then we're going to look at kind of the healthcare and experiences and impacts on the LGBTQ community. I'm hoping to show a video. It is a 10-minute video, but I think it's really important because it has a lot more, yeah, stories from other individuals with a diverse sexuality that I'd really like the group to see. So fingers crossed technology works for us in this space. And then I'll be talking about our role and what we can do to support the community. So just kind of those ideas and tips and just kind of key things of um, yeah, how we approach participants from the LGBTQ community, and just share with you some resources, which I think is another big piece of today. Hopefully, point you in the right direction of what are kind of key resources where you don't have to learn everything about it. I'm sure at some point today you go, oh my gosh, this is a lot of information, especially for 8:30 in the morning. But there are some great resources out there, and even I myself uh, always often go back to one called Q Life, which I'll mention at the end. And there's always these kind of resources for healthcare professionals on different parts of the LGBTQ community that I find really helpful to kind of ground me like, where do I fit in at this space? How do I support this person? We'll see if there's time for questions and stuff. If you do have any questions, you can put them in the chat and maybe Renee will prompt me with them. But yeah, let's
Yep,
get into it.
absolutely. I can
Yep.
facilitate the chat. Yep.
Yeah, good. Great. So we'll begin by just ensuring that we all have a kind of understanding around the same language. Uh, but before we start that, I just wanted to encourage you to take a moment of self-reflection. So I don't want you to write in the chat your responses to these questions, but I just want you to consider these questions for yourself. How do you describe your sexual orientation? How do you describe your gender? When did you feel first realize your gender? And when did you know your own sexual orientation? Have you ever needed to correct someone because they mistakenly thought that you were another gender? And do you think gay, lesbian, and bisexual is a personal choice? And so these, we start looking into it, and you can see from these questions, they kind of start to lead into these like bigger beliefs about the world around us. And for the LGBTQ community, these questions are really common. And they're often having to describe themselves on quite a regular basis, really kind of defend different parts of their sexuality or gender. Um, and yeah, so I just wanted to, acknowledge that in that first beginning that, um, yeah, kind of reflecting on you, like self-reflecting on yourself and where you sit with these things, is a really important first step of just kind of knowing, okay, where do I sit at the moment? And then how do I approach supporting the LGBT community? All right, so let's build up our vocabulary. So firstly, and we're kind of going to talk about these kind of different domains, and then I'm going to show you something called the genderbread person, which some of you may be aware of, and which sort of puts it into a more visual context, but it's just important we kind of go through these parts of separating it to, again, like I said, have that shared understanding. So firstly, when we think about our sex, we think about sex characteristics. So, um, this is like biological sex is what physical sex characteristics you are born with. So, if you are born with a vagina, you're presumed female. If you're born with a penis, you're presumed male. And so well, that's how we're defined. Our genders are defined from this early age on these physical characteristics. But some babies are born with neither set of genitals or often ambiguous genitals. And this is where as well intersex becomes more apparent. So intersex people are born with physical sex characteristics that don't fit the medical and social norms for female or male bodies. There's an estimate here of around 1.7 people are intersex, but it's quite hard for us to actually know, the true data around that just For a long time, a lot of people with intersex were not even recognized, and a lot of people didn't find out till they were much older in their life. So, um, for people who are intersex, now they might be defined as this at birth, but it may come up at puberty or even when they're trying to conceive. So, like I mentioned, there's quite a long history where often there was just an assumption, oh, okay, based on the genitals, we're going to say this child is female, but later to grow up, find out that they're intersex. And then try to have a baby, not be able to have it. So there's a much broader kind of awareness of this now. Um, but yeah. And so intersex as well is about an individual's body and not related to sexual orientation and gender identity. Sex chromosomes, commonly, in humans, there are two forms, so the X and Y. XX is recorded as female and XY is recorded as male, but there are some other variations to that. All right, so getting into gender identity, which is definitely kind of the main focus of today. So gender identity is a person's internal sense of being a man, woman, or non-binary gender. Gender is a social construction. I definitely, in preparing today's presentation, went, we could have a long, 1 hour discussion or a deep philosophical discussion about this. But so gender doesn't always correlate to what was presumed at birth about a person. And gender sort of leads us into this idea of binary thinking. So, from an early age, we are taught to pair things, happy, sad, rich, poor, man, woman. But quickly we begin to see that the world is much more complex from this. And this is definitely true when understanding the LGBT community. So binary thinking in this space, can be limiting and harmful to the individuals. And so non-binary is, so as I mentioned, we typically know man and woman, but some non-binary people identify somewhere in between a man and a woman, or even somewhere outside of this spectrum of a man and a woman. As I said, this is a deep philosophical discussion. Feel free to add, comments and things in the chat around this. But yeah, hopefully that gives you a basis where to start. So the term cisgender is a person who identifies as the gender as the same as what they were assigned to at birth. So, for I myself would identify as cisgender. I was born a male and I identify as a male. And you may hear the word cis as well as a shortened version. And then there's the trans and gender diverse community. So these are umbrella terms to describe people who identify their gender as different to what was presumed for them at birth. Some transgender people may view being trans as a journey or experience rather than an identity, while others see it as integral to their identity. Some people may identify as a trans woman or as a trans man, but some people may identify as their affirmed gender without that trans prefix. So this is that kind of important first step of acknowledging it's important for us to ask people about, things like pronouns and how they wish to be spoken about, because as I just mentioned, that could be a really important thing to be identified as a trans woman, or maybe someone has gone, no, I just want to be identified as a woman now. That's what I've decided. All right, so gender expression. Um, so this is kind of referring to those ideas of feminine and masculine and kind of in between that androgynous. So gender expression is that external representation of how you communicate your gender through ways you act, dress, and style your body and interact with others. And this could be based on, traditional or societal accepted roles. The roles and constructs societally impact gender early on. So think, blue for boys and pink for girls. I was when I was preparing this, I was reminded of my sister's daughter, and we were having a conversation, and she asked me, "Oh, what's your favorite color?" And I said, "Ah, purple." And she said, "Oh, no, that's wrong. Your color's blue." and she was 4 years old. And I remember being so surprised by this, and then just realizing that it just is everywhere. This societal picture of man, woman, boy, girl, pink, blue, like it's just this representation. And, this young child was forming her view of the world. Um, so yeah, that's a big, yeah, part of it. So the way you express gender doesn't also need to align with your gender identity. So some feminine appearing people may identify as men. Some masculine appearing people may identify as women. Some people choose to dress in an androgynous way. And a person's pronouns as well are a part of how they express their gender. So that'll be a piece we talk about today, asking people about their pronouns. But, pick up on these cues about how people dress. That's an important part of them showing you who they are. As much as we're kind of talking about this kind of fluidity with gender, there are still this idea of more masculine clothes or more feminine clothes, and that's someone showing you who they are and how they present and how they want to be perceived. And, there's a lot of people that will use things like clothing, depending on how they feel that day. So maybe wanting to wear something more feminine one day with a group of friends, or then something more masculine in the setting they're in. And so, yeah, just to lastly mention how a person expresses their gender is fundamentally different and not related to their sexuality. All right, so sexual orientation. So we'll just kind of go through these. And for me as well, sexual orientation is really that reminder of this is an evolving space and one that comes, with quite a history as I kind of go through these things. So lesbian, a woman who is attracted to women. Gay is a man attracted to men, although you will, commonly hear this term used for same-sex attraction. So a lot of people will just say I'm gay as a broad term. Bisexual, so that is someone attracted to more than one gender. And below that is pansexual. So that one's someone with an attraction regardless of gender. And so even bisexual and, pansexual, again, are these evolving languages, especially in, removing that idea of man, woman as the main format. Now with the idea of gender fluidity, these, bisexual, pansexual can move a bit more fluently for how people might describe themselves. Queer, so this is an umbrella term used to be inclusive of anyone whose gender or sexual orientation does not fit within the norm. But we do need to acknowledge this was previously used as a slur in the past. And so for some people, this may be offensive. I think a big piece of the LGBTQ community is that as we work with participants, um, across the lifespan, everyone from a different age will have a different understanding of what it means to be queer. And, the younger generation will be more evolving with that. The older generation will have an idea of what feels comfortable for them and what feels safe for them. So that's an important thing to consider. Asexual or ace, which is more commonly used now, the term ace. So this is an umbrella term for people who lack sexual attraction or are aromantic. And straight, individuals attracted to the opposite sex. So as I mentioned, and well done, that was like a lot of language, but it's learning the language of the LGBTQ community, honestly, is like such an important step. I think feeling confident that you understand, the difference of gender, sexual orientation is really key. For me, even when I'm working often with other stakeholders, when I'm supporting a participant who's gender diverse, I can almost hear in their voice that they don't feel confident just saying, oh, this person identifies as trans. Like they just feel nervous about it. And I'm like, you don't have to feel nervous. This is what it is. We've talked about it. We've said the pronouns, ask the question. If you're not sure, go, sorry to have to ask, but I just want to go back and double check. Thanks, thanks for updating me. So developing a confidence with the language is a really important first step. So this genderbread person, there's also, you may have seen a gender unicorn. As you can see on the slide, it goes through that gender identity, gender expression, biological sex, sexually to or romantically attracted to. And you can see the kind of arrows there, which is just really acknowledging this spectrum of things. So I think if you're feeling like you need something just to kind of give a quick snapshot um, of gender, then definitely use this tool. There's also a website attached to it with different resources and that. I've seen people use this with participants as well, just to have a conversation about it. So yeah, definitely explore if that's a use. So I am wanting to move into now, and again, I'm not sure if there was anything in the chat or any questions, because as I said, I'm very aware this first bit was a big piece of information. No, no questions, all good. Um, so I'm going to share some of the experiences of the LGBTQ community, and then I'm going to play a video, and the video does go for about 10 minutes. So I've put up this slide and you can see lots of, different statistics, and you may already be aware of different statistics from the media, from your work, and maybe some of this is surprising. Maybe some of this is not surprising. I definitely remember that through the gay marriage vote, there was a lot of discussion about the impact on the LGBT community. Um, uh, we feel very grateful that the marriage equality vote came through as a yes, but there are a lot of people fearing that it may have been a no. And to think about what that would have meant for the community um, was something that really affected a lot of individuals. Um, and so I'm just going to share some statistics here. So some of the key ones that I pulled out. So mental health for the LGBTQIA plus community compared with national averages include that they're 14 more times likely to attempt suicide, twice as likely to experience anxiety disorders, and 3 times more likely to experience affective disorders such as depression. The causes are complicated around this. They may include rejection from their family and friends, bullying, homelessness, rural isolation, and also lack of access to services, and resulting in ongoing stigma, prejudice, discrimination, and abuse. The research also shows that there's higher rates of drug and alcohol abuse. HIV, despite there being treatment available for this now, still holds a lot of myths and stigma, and individuals do not seek treatment for this. Another aspect is, and you can see it on the kind of the bottom of the slide here, is the idea of multiple minorities. So this refers to individuals who are in the LGBTQ community, as well as being in another minority, such as being overseas born, Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people, or also someone with a disability. So kind of as we look at these facts and consider our work, we will be working with a lot of these participants who, do have multiple, are part of this multiple minorities, having a disability, having mental health, being a part of the queer community. That's definitely, yeah, a few of the participants I work with in this space. So as I mentioned, I want to show a video now, and yeah, it does go for about 10 minutes. I'd really encourage you, throughout it, if something sticks out to you or a comment someone makes, please add it in the chat, add in any reflections. Yeah, I think it's a useful video to, as I said, hear some other voices, not just mine, about their experiences with healthcare. And then we'll use the last bit to just kind of name, okay, so where do we fit in and what are some resources for you? So fingers crossed this video works. Hopefully we can hear that.
Uh, Can others hear it? Yep. Okay.
I can't hear it from my end.
Okay, I think some people can and others can't. So perhaps try turning the internal volume on your Teams up, those who can't.
All right. Thanks for watching that video. I think even as I was watching it, I think when it starts off, it just reminds me about that what we kind of hear from the people is that the experience that they've had, they've started to avoid accessing healthcare and support like that. We know that people avoiding healthcare, start to lead to more significant problems in their life. And it's really that reminder to me of just, our role as professionals is to create a slightly more positive experience than the last person to keep them kind of engaged and utilizing services. We might not be the person that has all the answers, but how can we support them get to the next step? So now we're just going to have a look at some ideas and kind of key ways to think about your work with the LGBTQ community, and I'll share some other resources with you that I think are really key if you're wishing to develop, knowledge in particular areas or working with a particular participant who identifies in this community and you're wanting to understand a bit more about their experience. So, firstly, reflect on your own assumptions and biases. As I mentioned, even throughout this session, we started off doing some self-reflection and giving space for self-reflection on this, raising your own self-awareness. Wow, there are all these other things to consider is a really great first step. And as I said, kind of building that confidence around who is part of the LGBTQ community. Um, Leave your opinions at the door. This is not the time for you to express all your opinions about everything. And, these are not our roles as healthcare professionals. We're really here to listen to the person, and, your role is to support the participant. And as we kind of mentioned, they're the expert. So understand their story, their narrative of their gender, their sexuality. So using inclusive language. So, as mentioned in the video, but ask for their pronouns. So if you're aware you're going to be working with someone um, in the LGBTQ community, then, ask them their pronouns. Or, I was working with a participant recently and I said, oh, just before we start, so as I mentioned, my name's Ryan, my pronouns are he, him. Can I ask you yours? And then we just started that way. And it was kind of as simple as that. But I reflect on that moment was really important because I think it was maybe 4 or 5 months later, the person kind of was like, I think I want to talk more about this thing with you now. And, I feel comfortable with you, and let's talk more about, my sexuality and explore this a little. And so I think that important piece is a first sign of showing safety around this. Um, and yeah, it supports the individual to feel affirmed and acknowledged. Um, the pronouns you hear are often he, him, she, her, they, them. You show in the video, even there's kind of variations on what people choose. Um, Again, this is where it's important just to ask the person and then accept whatever it is they've said. Maybe they have a mix of those pronouns. There's also pronouns coming into play like the, which is a pronoun that kind of doesn't create any gender identity. And so, this again will be an evolving space. Never use a dead name. So as you heard in the video, so a dead name is the birth name of a transgender person. And so it's really important that you just use the name that they've provided with you and not use that their dead name. This is a challenge we face in healthcare. Sometimes, old forms, old files, things like that. That's something that, again, though, we can advocate for. We can advocate, like, has this been changed on your NDIS plan? How do we support that? But also that we're asking, around this story, is this the correct name, and checking in with them. And call out inappropriate pronouns if they're used, if it is safe to do so. So that's a complex thing. But if you feel, you're with someone and, they identify as she, her, but you keep hearing, the other workers say he, him, again, if there's a general awareness, call that out. But be very conscious of that, especially if you're working with people, whether they're openly out about their queer identity, things like that. So just really consider that. And again, if you're unsure, have a conversation with your participant at a separate time going, I wanted to ask you about this. I heard someone not using the correct pronouns. Can I ask you about that? Sometimes you might have a conversation and they go, oh, yeah, I actually let my grandma call me that pronoun because I feel more comfortable that way. So if you're not comfortable in that space, just have a conversation with them, open it up. Which leads into create a safe space. I really think this is the biggest key in this. And this is what, we hopefully are doing in all of the work we do. So use your clinical skills of active listening and empathy. Even in the video, the person's like, I think some people just need to listen. It sounds so simple, but really listening deeply to what people are saying, paying attention to those things. When you ask about the pronouns, ask them and remember them. Don't forget them and then have to re-ask them again. And do feel comfortable to ask questions. If you don't know, ask. I was working with an individual not long ago, and they were referring to their sexual identity as ace. And I hadn't actually realized that that was a shortened version of asexual. And they'd also added on some other factors to that. And so I was like, sorry, can I just check in on my understanding of ace? Can you describe it to me, what you mean? And I was like, great, now I know. So be comfortable and confident in your approach. Like I said, I can sense that people feel really uncomfortable, but be, like you probably hold more knowledge than you realize, feel confident with using these terms. And just remember they're the expert. We want to allow them to tell their own experience of their story and ask them about how they want to discuss their own gender and sexuality experience. Not everyone in the LGBT community wants to be talking about their sexuality, gender all the time. For a lot of people, it's just part of who they are. Sometimes it's for them maybe the least interesting part of their life, and they want to talk about these other things. So, even in the video, people mentioned, they would bring up the sexuality. It's only if it's relevant to the situation. Continue to learn. So as I said, it keeps evolving. And even as I prepared this presentation, just that reminder of like spaces where I've learnt things. We're quite lucky now, again, around that awareness, like read, watch, listen. There are books, there are stories, there are movies, there are wonderful things that kind of represent the LGBT community. And participants may share resources with you that helps connect you with what their experience is. I've had a lot of younger participants share with me different resources, videos, influencers, whatever it may be. And I think that's really powerful at them kind of sharing something to help me with my understanding. Obviously, always be mindful to choose trustworthy websites. There's a lot of information out there. I'm going to share with you some resources at the end and hopefully even share on my screen one of the pages just so you can see what it offers. Um, and yeah, so utilize kind of the websites I provide as the first step. Please add in as well any resources into the chat that you think the group, I'm sure there's a wealth of knowledge out there in this space. Depending on kind of the people, like for me, a lot of my work is more with adults, but I hear a lot of clinicians work with younger participants, and there's some incredible resources coming through in that space. And so really our role is to be a link to services and support. We first create this safe space and we let them know, thank you for sharing these things with me. Let's find a way to kind of connect you with the right people while you feel comfortable and safe. What can I do to support you with this? And so that is this beginning place of, educating yourself on the kind of vast tools and resources available. Be an advocate, understand that the role of sexuality and gender and its relevance for the individual. So like I said, it may not be everything for the person, but on the other hand, we don't want to minimize it. It is a key part of who we are as human beings. It's how we define ourselves in the world. That's why it is so important, this idea of gender. It's about not wanting to feel like the other and wanting to feel like, where is my place in the world? So it likely is, potentially a key part for the community. And share resources with the LGBT community. So like I said, and kind of even as you heard from the video, people are not accessing things. So their awareness may be really low that there is a number you can call and ask for advice. Like that there are relevant websites that you can turn to locally as well. Like again, turn to clinicians in your space. I'm sure there'll be clinicians who are like, yep, there's this, clinic here that supports the trans community. There's this clinic here that is queer affirming, all of these things. It's a real growing space. So I just want to share some resources with you. So I'm going to start off with Q Life. For me, this is one of the key resources that I would turn to in terms of getting more information. And it's also a service that you can provide to participants who work with. So there's a website, but there's also a number they can call and, open up questions or things that they might have and, link them with like I often remind my clinicians, especially in the psychosocial space, we're often getting lots of other complex things along with the psychosocial disability. I often remind them, we really aren't the experts in this space. There are other services that are more defined in this space that can really help individuals. And so I'd really encourage you to, bookmark this website. So there's a whole page on resources for clinicians, kind of like, every thing is broken up. So bisexual, asexual into these kind of 2 to 3 page sheets around just developing your understanding, your approach, ideas around that. So I'd say it's a really relevant, resource to look into. ACON, you heard it mentioned in the video. So they provide a lot for the community across Australia, but I think more predominantly in New South Wales. A lot of the great resources come from New South Wales. They provide training and things, but yeah, there's definitely resources on there for the LGBTQ community. Trans Hub, so more specifically to support the trans community. So again, resources, information. A lot of these websites, you'll go onto them and they'll be like commonly asked questions. So again, if you're, coming out of today going like, oh, I have this question, but I'm not sure if I'm comfortable to ask Ryan. Maybe I shouldn't be asking that and stuff. Go to these website and, find a space that feels comfortable for you and read through. A lot of these questions are really common that you might have, and that if you're still feeling there's gaps in your knowledge, you're not alone. I just wanted to mention Black Rainbow. Like this is a volunteer-run service, but it is a service that's connected to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. You'll also see the addition of SB at the end. So that's sister girl and brother boy. So again, unique to this community. This is less so, Q Life is still, I would say, like a key service in terms of a resource for individuals with that number that's kind of 24-hour service. This is a volunteer run service, so has some information on it and stuff, and you can reach out to them, but just remember that it's run by volunteers, so they're not expecting lots and lots of engagement from us. Pride in Health and Wellbeing. So this is a national program, and it actually provides support to kind of organizations around this space. So, this again, thinking about being an advocate, think about the work we do as participants, but as we sit here in this space, we're in this education session, think about, how does AAA kind of keep developing this space? How do we show that we're LGBTQ inclusive and stuff? So again, if you're a clinician that feels passionate about this area, maybe this can be a space where you continue to support our work here at AAA. And as I mentioned, each other, you're a wealth of knowledge. I bet there are like so many things out there. I see the Teams chats where people ask questions to each other. Please share these things with each other and, share them now as well. So as we mentioned at the start, feedback, we're always appreciative of feedback. You can send it through to the email or respond to the reactions feedback at the end. And I'll just kind of, conscious there's only a few minutes left, I'll stop sharing my screen. Yeah, I realize there's only a few minutes, so there's probably not much time. Oh, my screen froze a little. If anyone has a question. But if anyone does have a question, please ask it now. And if not, I will just show you the Q Life website to finish off.
No questions in the chat yet, Ryan. Thank you for that.
Okay.
So many resources. That's amazing. I think that's always so good for us to be able to go back to, not feel the pressure of remembering everything.
Yeah, yes, exactly. And that's where I would say, even for myself, I was working with a clinician recently, and they were asking about, oh, what is, this question around sex workers and where do they fit into that? And actually, even when I looked at Q Life, they had a whole 3-page kind of information sheet on it and said like, and different resources connected to that. So yeah, maybe with our last couple minutes, I'll just quickly share my screen to show you. So this is the Q Life website. And so if you go to resources, then they have Q Guides, which is for clinicians. And you can see there's kind of individual guides on all these different areas. So as I mentioned, there was a lot I can't cover today. Religion and spirituality. So again, another part of societal views, the older community, um, yeah, family violence, intersex. So there's a lot of information on here. Resilience. So again, there might just be a wealth of knowledge here that you can use.
Amazing.
Alright. Cool.
Is there anyone
Well,
have any questions for Ryan before I let him wrap up?
I
You've
do
covered
hope.
it all.
Yeah, well, as I said, I really acknowledge it is, quite a lot of bit of information. We will share with you, the resources from today, and where to turn to best for this. But I do hope, as I said, maybe hopefully it's even just validated, reassured some of your practice that you're taking the right approach in your non-judgmental approach. That, yeah, again, that gives you some resources to kind of start off with and yeah, as I said, build your confidence in this space. But yeah, thank you so much for attending and listening to today's presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan, for providing us with that opportunity. Lots of great comments about thanking you for your presentation. No questions. I'm sure there'll be some come up over the next couple of weeks. But
Yep.
yes, so from me, thank you for undertaking this and also those amazing resources. It's going to make a real difference to a lot of people. I think just being able to know where to go,
Yep.
it makes me think that we maybe need to get a page on the intranet. So perhaps that's something you and I could take offline
Yeah.
and do because there's a one-stop shop to get to all of those places.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
excellent. All right. Well,
All
thanks
right.
everyone for joining us. Do just watch out for the feedback survey in the chat in a moment, and much appreciated if you could respond to that.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good Monday. We'll send on resources at some point. I'll just